That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Luckiest Girl Alive, the sixth film directed by Mike Barker, which premiered on Netflix October 7th, 2022.
Do you know this director's other films?
They've worked in television for an awful long time, since their last feature was in 2007, Shattered, starring Pierce Brosnan, I believe. I am familiar with an Oscar Wilde adaptation they did in 2004 called A Good Woman, starring Helen Hunt and was it Scarlett Johansson? And also 1999's Best Laid Plans, starring Reese Witherspoon and Josh Brolin, which perhaps explains Barker's connection to this material because Witherspoon's production company bought the rights to this 2015 novel directed by Jessica Knoll. That's why Bruno Papandrea shows up as a producer.
So the basic story is Mila Kunis plays a lady who seems to have it all. She's been offered her dream job, but she's also set to marry like this rich, handsome man. But she has to make a decision because if she marries him and moves to London or wherever, the EU,
They're going to London, yeah.
then she can't take her dream job at the New Yorker, I think?
Yes, the New York Times.
Oh, the New York Times, sorry. Okay. At the same time, there's a documentary being made about a school shooting, and a survivor of the school shooting is implicating Mila Kunis's character as being involved in the shooting. So back in the day when she was in high school, she went to this like fancy school for rich kids. She wasn't rich. She was on there she was there on a scholarship. There was this group of bullies who like gang raped her, and they were awful to other people too. And another group of people they were awful to decided to come to school with guns and shoot them. So that's how the mass shooting happened. But the question is, as the audience, was she involved? The answer is no. And then she decides that through this process, she wants to sort of do things her own way, which means that she's going to take the job with the New York Times and not marry the rich guy at the end.
Yes, at the very end, she's using her confrontation with the past to discover that she's kind of created a semblance of a human that she really isn't, because there's supposed to be this juxtaposition between how she presents herself and her internal ongoing commentary and monologue.
Did you like this movie?
It was okay. I think that there are a couple issues that I think might have been better assisted by some casting. I was stuck earlier because I can't remember off the top of my head if A Good Woman's actually an Oscar Wilde adaptation. It's an adaptation of something. Jessica Knoll, who wrote the book, crafts her own adaptation, much like Gillian Flynn did with Gone Girl for David Fincher. But I think you need a kind of a stronger director than Barker, who, as I said, has been kind of in various very high-profile television productions over the past, nearly 20 years. And I think you needed somebody to kind of rein in the pulpiness of it a bit. Because as it stands, I think it feels like telling more than showing. And again, I understand as a mechanism of adapting this particular comparison between who she is as a person, Ani, who's changed her name from TifAni, and as I understand in the novel, there are more variations on the name as she's kind of, fiddled with her persona. I understand that's a kind of a very easy way to show that, but it comes across as, with how Mila Kunis is reading it, all of the narration sounds kind of like, if you're familiar with Family Guy, sounds like Meg.
Well, she'll never be able to help
I don't think she'll ever be able to help that. So it's almost like I wish they had gotten a different voice actor to portray the reality of her voice, which I think would have been more interesting. And also, I think Kunis feels a little bit too polished for a woman that should be kind of always just eluding desperation to be kind of discovered that she isn't really who she says she is, or she's still trying to figure out what she wants and who she wants to be. But there's a very high-profile cast. She's been working as a co-editor for this women's publication called The Women's Bible, and Jennifer Beals shows up with not as someone named Lolo, who doesn't have a whole lot to do. Of course, as a mechanism of this narrative, she really doesn't have any chemistry, Mila Kunis, with Finn Wittrock, who plays this, very well-heeled scion of some mega rich family that she's about to marry. And then her own mother, Connie Britton, who I think looks fantastic and kind of has a lot of fun with her role as a mother who's, maybe not been the most supportive to her daughter, even though she thinks she has been. There are a lot of interesting things about trauma, I think, that you usually don't get, I think, in these kind of scenarios, especially involving rape. Because, of course, like this gang rape is pretty unpleasant. And then, years later, her fiance doesn't know that experience. He knows about the school shooting she survived, but doesn't know about the rape and how that kind of is informing their sexual dynamic. And I wish that we had pushed a little further into that, because that, I think, is something worth exploring that seems very taboo when it comes to victims of sexual assault. And, especially depending on what age you are when that happens and how that kind of crafts how you are as a sexual being. But yeah, again, I think maybe a stronger director would have been able to kind of lead into some of those things, because otherwise this is on track to being more like the Girl on the Train film version versus Gone Girl.
Okay.
But a whole slew of other notable people. Scoot McNairy shows up. I did like the young woman that played the young version of Mila Kunis, Chiara Aurelia. I thought she was really nice. Like, I thought those, for kind of a very heavy subject matter, I thought she did a really good job. It's just, again, I think the script leans too much into this weird obviousness that's kind of laughable. Like, she's supposed to be the star student on a writing scholarship, and Scoot McNairy is like championing her essay on Holden Caulfield is an unreliable narrative. It's like, could we not go to the most basic elements that you possibly could with some of that? I don't know. But I think Kunis does have a few good lines as she's trying to be manipulated into this doing this documentary, because this director tells her, like, think of all the women you're going to help with your story. And she's like, all the women will be fine. Like, I need to think about myself. I think a more interesting film that deals specifically with this period and the generation of young people that grew up with school shootings, particularly in 1999, was Vox Lux.
Okay.
If you remember that, where Natalie Portman plays this girl that survived a shooting because she sold her soul to the devil, becomes a pop star. Like, there are a lot of things that I like going on with that more than this. But it's certainly, it's almost 2 hours, which feels a little bit long considering the material. But again, I think a little bit of tinkering could have made it a bit stronger than it is. What
would you give it?
2.5. Anything
else?
I don't think so.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.